Welcome to this webinar. We're just going to wait a few seconds for everybody to kind of trickle in. Um, while people are trickling in, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Aaron Stoller. I'm kind of the one that's been behind all of the advertisements. Unfortunately, I goofed up my schedule. I apologize for that. And I am going to give this over to the current chair of our private and public ecologists section, Sarah Anderson. She is also the chair of the Public Affairs Committee. Did I get that right, Sarah?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. With the Public Affairs Committee with ESA. She is an absolute wonderful source for career advice. And I'm going to just give it over to her. Feel free to reach out to any of us, though, on LinkedIn and via email. And Sandra will probably give that information later on. But thanks for all attending, and I'm going to pop off now.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, for organizing and setting it all up, and enjoy your vacation. Um, Welcome, everyone, to the next installment as we kick off season 2 here of Exploring Careers and Opportunities in Ecology. We're very happy to have you all join this webinar series. The goal is really to dive in and hear stories and maybe get a little advice and guidance for people's entering the ecological workforce, maybe looking for a career transition, just curious to learn more about career paths that you maybe didn't follow, end up following, but want to learn more about, because the world of ecologists is incredibly diverse, incredibly broad, and you can find yourself in so many different places, from the NGO world, and non-governmental organizations of all sorts, industry, across many different kinds of industries and roles in industry, and then also in government, from local to state to national levels. And so, the world of possibilities is huge, and it's best to kind of just see and learn from different individuals who have had really unique career paths. And we're really lucky to have two folks with us today, Ryan and Gabriel, who are going to just share a little bit about their journeys, and hopefully you'll get a chance to learn, maybe hear a few insights, learn about opportunities that you maybe had not heard before, and just kind of diversify the places where you might look to find ecologists with similar interests to yourself. And so we're going to start with Ryan. Ryan, if you want to come on
Yep.
and introduce yourself and your background, um and we'll just kind of get going with, I've kind of got 3 questions teed up. I probably should go through the the plan for the day. Is we'll chat here with Ryan for a bit. We'll take a bit of a pause for our wonderful staff with ESA coordinating this, Sandra, to come on and share some information with all of us and some resources. And then we'll have a similar conversation with Gabriel in the second half, and hopefully we'll have time for a little bit of Q&A. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A function. There is the chat, but for questions, please use the Q&A function. That way we have the questions in one spot, we can respond to you. And if we don't get time during the webinar to respond to you, we'll have those questions and can follow up. So be mindful of the 2 different avenues by which to communicate and engage during the webinar. But Ryan, with that, go ahead,
Yeah.
introduce yourself and just share a little bit about where you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name's Ryan Williams. I live in East Lansing, Michigan. My current role at Bayer Crop Science is called the Analytics and Data Science Hub Lead. And what that is, I sit in an organization called Plant Biotechnology, and I manage a group of 40 PhD scientists that are working on genomics, different AI applications for biotechnology, statistics, and just sort of general data science things that you could imagine in that realm. And I'm happy to dive into that further. One thing we've done a lot of is hire ecologists, because my background, I got my PhD in 2014 from Iowa State in ecology and evolutionary biology. ESA was the conference that I'd go to every year. It didn't matter if I had funding or not, I was going to go and I figured it out. It's sort of like what I always felt like was my home.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always thought about how we can bring more ecologists in the group, because I'm biased. I think we handle complexity and ambiguity well and understand complex interactions and how to model them. And so it's something that I really value. Um, and,
Absolutely.
yeah.
How did you, I'm guessing your degree, was it a master's or PhD?
It's PhD.
PhD. So PhD in ecology or in biology a little bit more broadly.
It was a EEB program, so it's
Okay. Mm-hmm.
interdepartmental sort
Yep.
of program. Yep.
Yeah, so going kind of from the evolutionary ecology biology realm to data and analytics. It's
Hmm.
I always love the names of, job titles that ecologists tend to hide in and hide under.
Right.
How'd you get from that realm to the other?
So when I started my PhD, I was primarily doing field work. I worked on a project where we were doing soil biogeochemistry and microbial ecology under different bioenergy cropping systems. I had a bunch of droughts kill all my field experiments. And so I
Oh
had to
no.
figure out how to leverage data and public data to do interesting things. And so I started to do a lot of work with already published, if people are familiar with microbial ecology, 16S data, where you're looking at who's there, which microbes are in the soil. And then this is sort of in the beginning of metagenomics. So we were doing a lot of metagenomics at that time as well. And so leveraging what was already in the public, but then our lab was developing our own data set. So I really started diving into R, Python, Bash. I became a software carpentry instructor, if anyone's familiar with that organization. Um, at Iowa State, you're able to do a minor in statistics with your PhD. So I did that as well because I was dealing with potentially what was going to be a two-body problem where I knew that my partner at that time was going to have to find a job as well. So I wanted to make sure that I could leverage my quantitative skills for a career, no matter where I ended up. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
what I was at a party one day when my wife was a postdoc. I was a remote postdoc. I was complaining about I don't know what to do with my life. Somebody worked at Monsanto and they said, "Hey, you could get a job with us." And I was like, "Nah, no way. You don't want to hire an ecologist." And I treated that as a second postdoc, and then I never left. And then
Mm-hmm.
all my friends who were languishing in a postdoc, not knowing what to do, I pulled them in as well. So yeah, it's been a good journey for me.
Yeah, that's an amazing example of the power of networking.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts on that networking piece that might be relevant to this audience?
Don't be afraid to talk to people and meet them and try to find those commonalities. If it's scientific, people but do it in a genuine way. Don't do it in just a way of like, I'm going to talk to you because I'm going to try to get something out of you. You come with genuine questions and try to build a relationship. And I think that's, if you do it that way, it's more likely to pan out in a positive way.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And as ecologists, we're usually pretty good at having a fair amount of curiosity
Hmm.
about the world around us, and it's just a little bit of learning how to transition that into people who may be just one step removed from the field that from the space that we often occupy, which especially coming up as students is often just academia.
Right.
Oh, very cool. So so it sounds like you've been in with your current company for at least a little bit here.
Mhm.
But what's your what's your current job, and then also what role did you come in with, and how is how's that professional arc what has been that professional arc as you've been with Bayer?
So I came in as someone I was a computational microbiologist, which just
Okay.
meant I was basically doing what I was doing my postdoc in grad school, but in a industrial context. And so it was pretty easy lift and shift. I had a little bit more resources dealing with larger data sets, but it's more or less the same thing. When you come into industry, you're a lot of times, if you're at least in our organization, you're kind of like a very trustworthy postdoc, more or less. You're given lots of space to do your work. Um, I've always had the issue of I like a lot of breadth, and sometimes I get bored with too much depth. And so,
Hmm.
as I wanted to get interested in more projects, management positions were opening up, and I applied for those because at that time in the company, as a manager, you could do a lot of technical work at the same time as managing small teams. Um, I worked in that sort of framework for a couple of years, and the organization that I sat within, somebody left. There was an open role, and then I applied and became a manager of a team of teams. So we had several people, or we had 5 different teams that were underneath me. And then we underwent a transition with a new CEO. There's a newer sort of management strategy now where you're seeing these very large teams. So now I have 40 people. So I don't have time for sort of technical work, but I help coach on a variety of things. And it's really what has driven me a lot is how my interest in other people and seeing how I can facilitate their work. I was always a great second or third author on a paper. I'll make those figures for you, but please don't ask me to submit the paper. And so I can do that now as my job where I am facilitating people in other ways, making sure they have the resources that they need, um, doing all those sorts of things that you need to be able to be like a confident and innovative researcher in our company. And that's
Hmm.
really what's driving me now. So there's a transition point between what am I doing versus how can I help other people? And if you find energy in that, there's a lot of opportunities for that in industry.
Yeah, just a whole different kind of level of problem solving,
Mhm.
um, from the days of the field work and drought experiments. Um, let's see here. Um, what I find that shift from the project work to managing people. What is your what is that your just favorite part of the job and is why you've shifted it to that much? Um,
I, yeah, it kind of is. So what happened was I was in an organization. I managed the organization that I started in. I got
mhm,
to know all the people, got to know their work because we present our work to each other. It's like you're essentially the same thing as a lab meeting, more or less, and people present their work and you get excited about it. And then you meet the people, you get to know them. And one thing that you see in industry versus in a lab when you're in grad school is that people hang out for a long time. We've got people, we recently had someone retire that had been in the company for 43 years. And so what he could tell you about the transitions of the company was amazing. And so you really start to care about these people. So when my boss left and there was that opportunity for someone there, it was during the pandemic. A lot of people
mhm,
were kind of worried about what it meant. Economic challenges were having huge fluctuations that are causing huge fluctuations in the ag market. And so everyone was concerned for their job. Because I really cared about these people, that was the main driver for me to want to be in that role. So I get to work with a lot of people that I genuinely care about, work that I think is really, really important, and sort of a general mission that I can really sink my teeth into because I was always going to the agroecology section meetings at ESA.
yep.
This is something that I like think about outside of work. I'm also adjunct at Michigan State University, and so I talk to students about this as well. And so because of that combination of seeing where you're contributing towards something that you genuinely care about, plus all the people there is really the big driver. But it's a hard transition. And I guess I just want to plug a blog really quick.
Mhm.
So the
Yeah.
guy who hired me at the company, I had a meeting with him just before this. And I was telling him what we were doing today and how I hand out his blog to a bunch of people all the time. So I might put in the chat if people want to read it. But he talks about
Absolutely.
this transition between being a technical contributor and then being a manager and what that's like in industry. So anyway, I'll put that link in if people can read it if they want.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Um, as you've made the shift from more research, more technical work into management and really stewarding projects and people in, the work that people are doing, what ecological skills and knowledge do you use most on a daily basis in that kind of role?
So I think what the thing it's like the sort of concepts that you bring from modeling have always been, and I think uh, like when you're in your stats courses or you're writing your papers and you're using like linear mixed effects models and you're thinking
Hmm.
about what you need to block and what needs to be a random effect and what things you can actually predict and where how
Hmm.
you partition variance and all these different sort of like we like things that are conceptual or quantitative you can apply to a lot of problems that you see. What can we control for? What can't we control for? um,
Hmm.
what can we actually measure? All these different things. We bring those sort of general concepts that you would do for any sort of observational or experimental study, and you apply them to things that are happening in the company every day. Um, it helps give you steps to address scary things, and it gives you a general language that a lot of folks understand that then you can apply. But yeah, I don't know. I try to turn everything into some sort of ecological problem ultimately, and some people probably hate it, but there's a few fans that work for me. So yeah, it works to some degree.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's, I feel like so many places really are ecosystems. And if you just step back and translate it into, what are the organisms? What's the population? What are those variables and those the things we can control, the things we can't, like
Yeah,
absolutely so it's so transferable that
a
those
lot of
all of those concepts.
competition, symbioses, all sorts of other stuff plays in
Yo.
there. Yeah, limited
Uh,
resources, what that's going to do to your ecosystem. There's a lot.
hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, yeah, for for someone who might be interested in a career like yours, or working at a, within an industry in this sort of capacity, or just on a team like yours, what's some advice that you would have for them?
So when you go to ESA, if there are career sections, please go to them, talk to those folks. That can be valuable. Pacifica Summers is somebody who's in my team. She's heavily involved with the ESA, not at Baltimore this year, but last year we had a sponsored session. We got Bayer to sponsor a session, and I think we did it the year previous as well. But other companies do this too. Start talking to those folks and engaging with them, again, in a genuine way of just asking, like, how do you do this? And what is it really like? Um,
Mm-hmm.
we sound like we're doing sales pitches most of the time, but like we can scratch the
Mm-hmm.
surface and get there. So that's a big part of that networking piece. When you network with people, keep up that relationship. Say, hey, my defense is coming up. I'm going to stream it because most folks have a Zoom link for their defenses now. Send them that Zoom link and say, hey, if you've got time, it'd be cool if you could call in. Maybe you'll have some questions. If I got that, I would be really excited because like I see one kind of science all day, seeing other things that enriches your day a bit. So those are good things to have. But we have a lot of creative people in ecology. Use that creativity and think about what fits your personality, what are you comfortable with, and how can you engage with folks in a way that might be special or meaningful to you. And I think that's the best way. There isn't a one size fits all. If you abhor going to some sort of happy hour thing at a conference and it makes you so uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
you should try it. But if it's not for you, try to think of other ways that do make you comfortable and engage with people that way. And whatever you can do that fits yourself personally, that's going to be your ticket because that's what you can thrive in.
Yeah, it's so important is that so much advice is just so generic, but that knowing what works for you so that you can really shine in those circumstances is such a great point, Ryan.
Yeah.
Um, Also, as being in a managing role,
Mhm.
you're also hiring people.
Yep.
What do you look for when you're you have a position? Like what skills, knowledge, savvy that ecologists have that always jumps off the page to you and is part of the, other than being one and knowing the complexity with which ecologists can handle and digest things.
Yeah.
Um, what what about being an ecologist is it that jumps out to you as somebody who's, looking to hire people in different situations?
So if I think about the context of where I work, we're in
Hmm.
R&D, so research and development, very, very early stages of our crop science pipeline. One thing that is critical to me and our organization is reproducible research. If you
Hmm.
can demonstrate reproducible research, that's a huge thing. So think about if you've got our code, put it in GitHub, make it public, let people see that you're hacking away at it. It's not perfect. As you're doing that, people see, okay, this is a way that we run all of our computational stuff. I'm biased, my group is computational, so that is part of our bread and butter. But if you want to work in another organization, they're going to see those skills too and think, ooh, I can have someone with lab skills, field skills, other skills, and this stuff on top. Make sure your CV is clear. Um, Pepper in personal details that you're comfortable sharing, but might bring some color to your personality. And then really think about that scientific communication piece. I have a friend who I actually met her through ESA at Baltimore in 2015, and she was my backfill at one point. And she
Okay.
worked on these herbivory exclosure experiments across these large landscapes. And she went, "How the heck am I ever going to convince like Bayer that I am someone who's hireable?" Like all you got to do is communicate it. You have these large scale experiments that come down to a certain finer grained measurement that you're making and use linear mixed effects models to do that. Make a real clear transition to instead of prairies, you have corn, you have different fields instead of different mountain regions. You have herbivory exposures. Those are the pests and insects that we have to deal with. You can model the same exact thing. She got that job. It was a very clear, like A to B sort of communication of how you leverage those tools. And so
Hmm.
don't let people assume how you can fit in. Tell them how you can help address their challenges using all those skills that you're building during your PhD or other degree programs.
Yeah. And I know sometimes that translating piece though can be a little bit tricky. Any tips for trying to figure out, if as student coming out, or even I find it like working across different parts of my organization to try to translate what I do to them sometimes can be a little bit tricky unless you have somebody who can has had a foot in both worlds. Any tips for trying to bridge that divide?
Yeah, so practice is good. Find those people that I mean, you kind of got to dig around and
Mhm.
build that network. Another thing I'll advertise here is that Bayer has a program called B4U. I'll find a link and put it in the chat later on LinkedIn. They'll have a website for it. We're at over 30 universities now in the US where you're
Wow,
paired with a scientist at Bayer to talk about these sorts of things. Like, what is it like in
that's
industry?
awesome.
What is it like to apply? What's it like getting a visa in a company? What's it like dealing with mental health and all these things? We provide a lot of resources for the students in this space. And so those sorts of opportunities that you can find through, it doesn't have to be Bayer, it could be any company.
Hmm.
Really think about taking those on. If there's ever an opportunity at your university to talk to recruiters, or they're saying, hey, we're going to take a tour to some company down the street, just take it. I mean, really, it's those conversations where you're forced to kind of tailor your elevator pitch to people where you're going to see what works and what doesn't work. And you need those failures first before you're able to like knock it out of the park. My first job talk that I gave for industry was trash. And I got really strong feedback that it was bad and we worked on it. But you got to have
Yeah.
that failure first.
Yeah, and what a great like low stakes way to have failures. Just the company down the street. It could be as far removed from your field of study, but just it's somebody who is outside of, academic research, outside of the classroom, outside
Yeah.
of your field of expertise to practice that translation. And you don't have to go talk to them ever again.
Yeah. If you fail, you're like, oh, well, whoops, it's fine. Move
Yep,
on. Yeah.
that's awesome. Um, for we're getting close to our 20-minute mark here. Oh wait, I think I already asked that. Um, any final thoughts that you wanna share with the audience, whether it's, somebody coming new into the field, or maybe even also a secondary bit of advice for people thinking about making career transitions.
I think one thing that I have found the best from for myself and from people in our field is that your quantitative skills can be leveraged for so many different things. If you like, just if you're like, oh, I can't find a job, like, can you think about your research as a special case of a general problem? And then how do you think about that more broadly? And not being afraid to try things. I mean, there's to some degree where it's too uncomfortable. You don't want to do it. Like that comment I made about going to a happy hour for networking. If that's not for you, don't do it. But think about like it's a lot of thinking about your own self and how you can be more general. It's going to be some self-exploration. Talk to friends about it. Find a mentor outside of academia to talk to. I mean, all these sorts of things. It's ultimately going to come down to that sort of communication and bouncing ideas off of somebody and practicing these interactions that are going to help you because you're going to need to have those interactions in an industrial context anyways. So please use that communication piece, and think about your quantitative skills, how you can display them and apply them to new problems, and that'll take you a long way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it. And just that's a really fascinating journey from, very, very technical, overcoming, the problems that befall all of us during our advanced degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then really honing in on those skills, but leveraging that ecological knowledge base to make a pretty big jump, and then transitioning into management is just really, really interesting perspective. Finding that passion and following it to really support a pretty large team of researchers.
Yeah.
Um, Really impressive. Thank you,
And
Ryan.
I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat. So if anybody wants to start that networking, they can. So just
Yeah.
invitation.
Why wait
Yep.
before
Yep.
the webinar is even over?
Yeah.
All right. As we transition between speakers, I'm going to invite Sandra on. Sandra, hopefully you're still with us.
I am. Thanks, Sarah. All right, I should be sharing my screen.
Yep.
Thanks, Sarah, again, Ryan and Gabriel. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Del Rio. I'm the Professional Programs Coordinator at the Ecological Society of America. Thanks for joining us today for the first episode of the second season of the Exploring Career Opportunities in Ecology webinar series. We have two more of these sessions. We try to hold them one monthly. So we have one in October and we have one in November. We're trying to get one scheduled in December, TBD. However, this month we have an additional webinar titled I Moved from Academia to Consulting, Ask Me Anything, and that will be next week. You can register for them in ESA's webinars page. I will be sharing all the links in the chat soon, so you can also access the recordings of past webinars there as well. I also wanted to share some valuable professional development opportunities available through ESA that you can register for. This month, we'll have using augmented reality for science communication and visual storytelling for scientists. And then on October 8th, we'll have Beyond the Basics, real-world applications and technical insights on environmental DNA, eDNA. Additionally, I'd like to mention ESA's Professional Ecologist Certification Program. For those who might not know, ESA has a certification program. In fact, Gabriel and Aaron are certified ecologists. And if you didn't know, ESA's certification has been around for over 40 years, and you do not have to be a member to get certified. And you can learn more on our website, esa.org/certification, or contact us at cert@esa.org. Also, other resources, career resources available through ESA. We have a career center powered by Wiley that allows you to post your resume and search for job opportunities that you can apply to. We also have the Ecolog listserv, and you can access ESA's online communities. You just need a basic web account, and a lot of job opportunities are posted as well. Again, I will be sharing the links in the chat in just a moment, but back to you, Sarah.
All right. Thank you so much, Sandra. Appreciate it. All that great information. All right. For the second half of the webinar, I'm going to invite Gabriel Thoumi to come on and introduce himself to start, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Well, hello, Sarah, and hello, Ryan. So nice to be together as an ESA family today. You know, my background is certainly different and maybe opposite of most of you. Most of my career has been in the private sector, not as an ecologist, but I've worked on and off for decades with ecological scientists in various capacities. And frequently I would be on a project team with them and see the creativity, as Ryan has described on one hand, and on the other hand, the computational skill and veracity and tenacity and problem solving, especially around complex systems that they brought to these teams, and that I thought was priceless, remarkable. And so I have been working in sustainability and sustainable finance as a finance research manager in various capacities for 20 years. Now a little bit more about me. My first sustainability project was in 1987. So there you go. And then from 1990 to 1992, between a time at university, I spent time in the North Atlantic as a junior deckhand with Sea Education Association, looking at
That's
plastic
awesome.
waste, climate, and other issues in the North Atlantic. I'm a trained ecologist from the University of Michigan, so pardon me, Ryan, I'm just down Route 23, but I live in Europe, so I don't get to go to any of the college football games.
That's good. I was a little nervous about a potential blue-green divide on this call.
No, it's more marketing, and we need to get more of the University of Michigan students up to Michigan State, because in some ways have much stronger scientific programs there, objectively. So I posted some links in the chat, right? That's not advertisement. That's not what it is. It's that for the last 3 years, Responsible Alpha has hosted a special session at ESA at the annual conference, the last one in Baltimore, on how private sector is connected to ecologists, and specifically looking at metrics. And we use the lens of environmental social governance. And in those links, you're going to find videos by Bloomberg, the data vendor, talking about how they look at nature-based metrics, right? And Melanie Roy, who's the Bloomberg head for nature, she put that together for you. So if you want to meet Melanie, let me know. She'd love to meet you. She's the second year in a row or third year in a row she's done a video for ESA for the conference. You also have summary of metrics there that are just that the graduate students at University of Michigan that we have a project we're leading and put together for you. And you also have sample reports, right? It's a very different type of style of writing. It's an individual, I think Natalie had a question about consulting. That's more the style of writing you find consulting, where we have a problem statement, we provide some context. We don't go into deep analytics, but as you would might find in a peer review paper, and you provide a set of solutions. So functionally, what I have found my role the last 20 years to do is to try and bridge the gap between science and business. And I'm always trying to bring scientists to business because we have so few scientists in business. It's extraordinary how few scientists we have in business. I could say we have more climate scientists on Wall Street than ecologists. But if I told you how many climate scientists I know on Wall Street, you'd be like, oh my gosh, so that means so many fewer ecologists. But that is the opportunity set for all of you, right? Now, and Sarah, cut me off if I'm going a bit long. Just
no, that's
okay.
I've got my eye on the clock. You
Okay,
just
good.
keep going,
Ryan jump
but I
in,
may
if
jump in with a couple questions.
We've been training ecologists through Responsible Alpha. We have a recent ecologist who's recently joined us, a PhD, Nicole Reed, who we met through this platform, because we're trying to solve that issue one step at a time. Another way to think about it structurally is if we look at the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the United States by market capitalization that are publicly traded. And we said, went on to one of the data vendors and said, okay, we looked at all the board members, maybe there's 10,000 or something, whatever the number is, or whatever that number is. We said, how many of them have bachelor's, master's, or PhD, natural resource science degrees? I would buy you all a beer. Can I say that, Sarah? Or wine if you want a wine?
Yeah.
I'm in Austria.
Or coffee,
It's
we'll take all or tea.
I did bring some
all
schnapps
palettes.
to Baltimore for the ESA management team, and so they said they really enjoyed it the last night. If you could find any more than 5 that are natural resource scientists, PhDs, and if there's even one ecologist, that just so these are the companies making the decisions around how do we incorporate functionally ecology or natural capital, which is like a layer cake, which on top is the next layer is going to be human capital. On the top of that is financial capital, or economic capital. How we look at sustainable growth over the decades and centuries when we look forward. And you're not there. I mean, I want you there. That's my whole purpose and why I've been a certified ecologist since 2013 is to try to open up those doors for you. Because we need you as leaders in the private sector.
Speaking of those doors, I being an ecologist who early in my career was very like, I don't think business is for me. Like I want to be outside and on the land and where the ecology is. Really, ecology is everywhere. And what do you think those doors are that are real versus what are some of those that we just perceive exist as ecologists? I'm interested in kind of
Yeah,
both.
that's
Which,
a really good point.
which kind of barriers? I mean, there are some real barriers. I think we
Well,
chatted with Ryan a bit about, the translating piece that can be really hard. But I think as ecologists, we also put up, or at least I found that I've put up, at different times barriers where I was like, oh, that's not for me. And then end up finding out later that actually that was exactly where I probably should have been.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think if we had an open conversation and a poll or some way of talking together in informal manner right now, we'd have a really good long list. The thing on the barriers is that the barriers are not unique to ecologists, right? Now, I've spoken at these meetings a couple of times before, and thank you, Sandra and Aaron, for very nice invitations over the years, and John too. The barriers are often also in the private sector. So if we start from Sarah, if you don't mind, if we start from that point of view.
Yeah.
How many of you have we have friends who work in finance, which is, I'm trained in finance and as an ecologist deliberately. That decision made 25 years ago to try to bring these sectors together. But I asked my finance friends, what's the difference between a plant geneticist and a biologist? They might have a sentence, right? But they're going to be very confident they know the answer. Of course, I know all, because it's that masters of the universe syndrome they have, right? But if you start asking them about ecological content and theory and simple things, they're lost. So I used to have I have a painting here in my house of by a family member of it's a beautiful, but it appears to be a forest, but it's actually a plantation. And it used to be behind me. Because
In the blur.
I had so many people in the finance sector saying, "Oh, that's a beautiful forest there." I'm like going, really? There's no herbaceous. Of course, it's a painting. You can't hear the dead zone. There's no insects. You can't see them. And of course, it's a painting. You don't hear and experience that. So there's like a fundamental gap, right? From the private sector understanding ecology. So in that model, what I'd say, Sarah, I'd say, well, interesting. So that's a painting of a forest. Yes. Then I share them a picture of a meadow of corn and rows. Like, oh, do you see this wild grassland in Iowa? I'm like, no, it's corn and rows. I'm like, yeah, that's the same as a forest. That's not a forest. It's a plantation. Try to break those barriers. But then you find but it's changing. And so the barriers are changing. There was recently a group, an executive from Citigroup who's trained as an ecologist, who went on a fact-finding mission in the through the Northwest Passage. You find people now. Before it was no pun intended. It was crickets. Right? It was silence, or crickets are not silent, but it was silent. Right? Now you do find those people. So going to what the ecologists need to do is we teach something over the years. I've been teaching at Johns Hopkins the same model, but I can screen share if you like. But it's what I posted on the LinkedIn chat. Values, interests, career, jobs is 4 layers, right? So values, interests, career, jobs. So many people like me, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, what's my job? Oh my God, what am I telling my family? My dad needs to know what my job is. What am I going to do? What's my job? I mean, it's just it's 1 a.m, you wake up, what's your job? Maybe you have that. I was very good at that anxious skill. And but no, I was answering the wrong question. What are my values? And and that determines what am I interested in? And what's my career? When I start answering those questions, it ends up painfully obvious what I want to do, right? And so that's what I'd ask people to start thinking about. What are your values? And then what is your career and what's your interest? And people start to figure out where they want to go. Now, the other thing, that's a sort of a philosophical approach. The other thing that's really important is that, the idea of how people act and dress and communicate is based on their community, right? We do the same thing in the private sector, right? So just be aware that, if one's going to a private sector event, you don't need to wear a tie, but wear a coat like this, You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be anxious. A lot of people won't know what they're doing in the private sector, won't know what's happening either. But just go say hi and chat with people, and then they're going to be really interested, because in the private sector now, biodiversity is a theme that people are seeking to address. That's changed significantly in the last 5 years. They don't know how to address it at all, generally. Right?
Yeah.
And then this is something from a policy, high level. Not with the work that Ryan's. I'm talking about policy of organizations. So we have the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. Please just attend those meetings, and you're gonna be like, oh, I thought this was gonna be, postdoc quantitative something, and like they're saying, do you have a policy that you recognize the endangered landscapes in your supply chain? Oh, okay, that's like, sophomore, junior level ecology at a state university, So sometimes we make a lot of assumptions about the gaps and the differences. And that's a very long answer, but there's a very significant demand for all of you. Just meet the people on the terms that they're comfortable at, and meet them informally, like Ryan was suggesting. It's really important. Ask them questions. What are you looking for? What do you need for staff, team members? And remember, you are all, regardless of your training, undergrad, graduate, postdoc, just an observer of today's conversation and as an ecologist friendly person, significant training in problem solving and looking at dealing with nonlinear circumstances, complex systems. And that's what everybody's trying to solve right now in business. Right? I'm a specialist in solving complex systems. They're not going to look at the degrees. Okay, what can you do? Some programming like Ryan and his team can do. Yeah. So it's part of me for being a bit long-winded. Hope that's
It's all
okay.
good. Yeah, no, we're still good on time. You have a lot of really great perspective about, just on a lot of these different things, but what is your current job right now? What does it look like? What does your
Yes.
day-to-day look like as you've, brought these two worlds of finance and ecology together?
Well, and pardon me for just talking a bit about myself. I don't want to bore you, but I think that's the nature of the question. So
Yeah.
I have 3 master's degrees, or 2.5. I have an MBA, a Master's of Science and Natural Resources Science, University of Michigan, a near master's is similar to sustainable urban planning, and a 4th one in finance. And that was by design 25 years ago when I was working in bond trading. I went from working on vessels to bond trading. That I wanted to work on climate change and sustainability. So I made that commitment about 2001, 2002 in that range. At the time, I don't recommend that sort of complicated education pathway. At the time, there wasn't standardized pedagogy and ways to teach and enough material and cases and stuff like that. So but in that long time frame, I've worked in asset management. I've advised asset owners like the Norwegian Government Pension Fund. I've worked with communities and indigenous trade associations in Amazon. I've worked with Interpol, the police association, talking about nature crime. I've, all in any number of variations on the way. I've covered deforestation, biodiversity, indigenous people's rights, gender, renewable energy, nuclear, and a bunch of other themes in Wall Street. So I started a consulting firm, and it's owned by us. It's more like a co-op, and they're all independent contractors at the firm. We all have the same rates. The same contract actually, not same rates, but same contract. And we help organizations solve complex system problems, just like I was talking about. But we only our theory of change is that we will only send an invoice to somebody if the work that we do for them is replicable by them. So leading to the concept, when you said replicability, I just really made my heart go, because yes, otherwise, there's no trust, or how do you know it's a black box? So you can see the type of work we've done online. And so I run this company, Responsible Alpha, and it's a little bit past the startup. My day-to-day is I teach finance. I'm grading finance exams for a CFA. I'm doing this today. This is all today. Writing blogs, managing teams, doing proposals, talking about deforestation risk in Brazil, working with scientists and business leaders. But most importantly, trying to demonstrate that we can execute hope as a business strategy in these complicated times, and we can work together as a community to really strengthen what we want our future to be collectively, and And when you said, Sarah, you talked about curiosity, it's actually the 3 or 4 principles we have for organization. And one of them is humility and curiosity, particularly by executives and leaders. So we do a lot of listening to the rest of the team.
What are the other principles? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. We have one. I'm curious what Ryan you might think about this. Start well, do well, end well. Because anytime I interview somebody, whether for a role, I'm like, so imagine Ryan, you're interviewing me, and you're like, well, you come work at Bayer, and like I worked with Gabriel quite a bit, so I'm like, no, yeah, I know Gabby, and I know Pacifica. It's like, well, Gabriel, so when are you leaving? How are you going to leave? Like, what? because people's lives change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be honest and straightforward about that, because there's good ways to start well, do well, and end well at an organization. And it's sort of a strange thing to say, right? But I ask
Mm-hmm.
people that interview process. Like, so, okay, one day, you know, you will leave. And so tell me about that process. What does that look like? And it's been really interesting because some of the
Mm-hmm.
people who are started as interns and one became an owner of shares in the company did a phenomenal job. You know, he's on the board. You know, gave me a 2-month notice, said this is my handover plan, blah, 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 blah. Spot on professional. And you know, if he was 23 years old, I'm not sure, not sure know when people's ages are. I would doubt it. I mean, he might be 22. You know, just wow, superb. Some humility and curiosity is the next one. The third one is 3 Ps: practice, presence, and participation. Right. So here, you know, we write blogs. You can see on the website. But why do we write a blog? Why do we write these papers? You know, they're not always going to be as good as we might want them to be, whatever. But you know, they popularize an idea. It's because practice matters, right? And I really learned this. You know, here I am with some scientific training in 2000 on a bond trading desk, and I had no business training ever. Like I didn't know the difference between accounting and finance. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
don't tell Wells Fargo at the time. I did a fine job. Nothing burned down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you know, I literally had no background. You know, and they're like, "Oh, you need to go to get you need to get a degree in finance." I'm like, "Okay," so I went to school. Um, you know, but so every day I did the same thing. I got better at it. It's that practice, 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 practice. And there's a way that finance in particular is that way. It really teaches one to do that. So that's why we write the blogs.
Mm-hmm.
Practice, practice, practice. Write the papers, right? Um, and so then presence is, you know, being engaged, not making assumptions, right? You know, me as a leader, as executive, that I'm maybe one of the worst people on my team about that. Be very careful. You know, many of the errors we've made as an organization is when we make assumptions, in particular, I've made assumptions. I always tell myself that, you know, Captain Obvious is like literally what I need to think about all the time. It's like, of course, there's a business as usual or best practice for any process out there. It's putting them together. I don't have to be smart and create my own best practice. That's a mistake. You know? So that type of thing, right? And then participation is actually really important. That's what the nature of this meeting is today. Our
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Yeah.
friendly conversation as an ESA family that you know, people get to ask questions and they can show up and they don't have to know the answer. And they can say, what can I do to help? How do I learn? How do I engage? And those types of questions are just so good in meetings, you know. And so it's that type of participation. Um, uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That's
hope,
awesome.
again, part of me is a little bit long-winded, but there you go.
It's all good. It's all good. Um, I do want to get to kind of the last of the trio of questions I was wanting to get through for both of you is, you know, what advice do you have for someone interested in trying to obtain a career like yours? And I think there's a few different ways to kind of think about that potentially because, you know, thinking about, you know, finding those intersections between ecology and other fields, starting your own, you know, having your own startup, you know, things that, you know, I think a lot of ecologists don't always think about.
Oh, I'll do a very short jump in. I want to hand the floor to Ryan. Uh, it's much easier to go work and be mentored by someone like Ryan or Lise Nellis, who's at Rambo, Aaron, who's at Exponent, and others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working at a startup or a smaller firm is interesting. You have a lot of startup and smaller firm issues, right? So if one is used to being in a sort of a programmatic approach to study and analysis and larger sort of frameworks around data and conversations around, you know, sort of just, you know, metrics and stuff like that, I would suggest looking at more of a corporate role. That'd be my sense. But a group where there are OER ecologists, so you're not the only one in the room who's ever worn flip-flops or Birkenstocks or whatever, you know. You know, because you feel comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that, Ryan? What would you suggest?
Well, Gabriel, I put it in almost like finance terms of thinking about your own personal risk profile for your investments
Yeah.
in the sense that uh, so when I first started I started at a company. The company was recently bought by Monsanto. I was the first Monsanto hire there, and so they all had the startup mindset. But I was coming from the mothership, like the big company, and so I got to see those two mindsets. And those guys love to have risk. They like the sort of danger of the company could fold, you could get bought, all these different things can happen. I was more on I liked the stability piece. That was more for me. And that's just what I knew I needed because I'm an anxious person. So just like you do for your retirement, you need to think about your personal risk profile and sort of what dynamics you have outside of work that might drive those things. What about your personal life is going to influence this too? Because you do have to go home at the end of the day. Once you kind of figure that out for yourself, starting to find examples of that. So it's like maybe I need to start thinking about startups because I like the sort of potential payoff there, but I'm also really excited about that sort of change of dynamic sort of ecosystem of companies that are out there. There's lots of resources for you can just Google startups and blah, you'll find stuff. If you want more stability, start looking at the LinkedIn pages or other websites for companies that you know have been around for a very long time. And that's one place to go. And so I think that's a good way of starting. And if you're going to just start your own thing altogether, start that networking piece. You're going to need that part because you're going to need to think about how you finance that group. Ultimately, it's going to come down to money to some degree. And so you need to start building that personal network of how you're going to leverage your skills to be able to make money because ultimately this is a career. And so those would be my sort of piece of advice of where to start. It's a lot of sort of self-assessment.
Oh, that's really good advice. Really good advice. Um, yeah, have a framework approach. Know that you're not the only person going through this process, right? Have a collective approach, like how do we talk to institutions, organizations? And I've heard like someone asked a question, what's the type of money you would make in the private sector? It's probably more than as academic, right?
Mhm.
We also have to work very different different work-life culture balance. Very different. You're gonna make plenty of money, you'll be fine. If that's the overarching concern, I mean, I would think more of what matters more is the culture and fit of the organization. Um, uh, Stuff like that. That's always much more important. Um, uh, when you meet your team in an interview process, if they're interviewing you, they've already decided that you're good enough for the role. If you're being interviewed, they've already said you can fit here. They're either trying to figure out how not to hire you or if they like you. It's about 80% of that process at this point is social, behavioral. So be really attentive to like if we have a meeting, like I know I've spoken quite a bit. That was my role today, and for Sarah and Ryan, we accepted that signing up, but we know that's the role. But be really aware that who's the decision maker in the conversation. Be attentive to their concerns. Be succinct and clear. And if they're interviewing you, you have a PhD in some natural resource science. Most of them are not, unless they're in the role like Ryan's in, most of them have no idea what the difference is between this PhD or that PhD. We have a PhD who did a PhD physicist on our team, is an astrophysicist, Mike Kroll. No one on our team knows any. I don't know if anyone even knows what a neutrino is. He studied neutrinos, So don't worry. Mike does really, really good, writes extraordinary good proposals and does very good analytics, speaking exactly to Ryan's, fits right in there, right? So, yeah.
I think one thing I want to add about that salary piece, specifically in the US, because of a few states with laws that they've passed, they have to post salary ranges with their jobs. And so a lot of if I think it was Colorado and a couple other states did that. So there's a macro trend of companies posting very wide salary ranges, but you'll see them in job descriptions. So when you need to know how much money you're going to make, it should be there. It'll be a wide range. Pick the middle. That's a good way to just say like, hey, there you go. Or a little bit higher so you can negotiate because you need to do that. But I agree. If you get to that interview stage, it's mostly about you hit all the requirements, the rubric, all the boxes are checked. Think about how you can fit in with their culture and ask them questions about what is the work culture there. so you can have that conversation with them. It should be a conversation, not just a transactional sort of approach. And one other thing, just because like that sort of interview process came up, don't be afraid to show some vulnerability in your interview process. I've interviewed a lot of people, and it's a surprising amount of people have said things like, I have never had a conflict with anybody. I have never failed at anything. I have never turned in anything late. And we're like, and now we know you're a liar because no one has gone through life that way. So think about those stories that you have, and then what is the learning that you come from them? You'll see behavioral based questions online that you can practice for interviews, where you have sort of a process of going through them and you always have a learning sort of a result. Make sure to practice those, and don't be afraid to like demonstrate vulnerability and those sorts of things and how you deal with conflict problems, all that stuff, because it's going to happen everywhere you work and in your personal life. So it's a good skill to have.
Yeah, and I think
Oh,
that that tiers really nicely into, you know, that question. There's a question in there specifically about aspects of that industry job talk. And specifically the question is on you know, going from an academic talk to an industry talk. So I think it might, with maybe really briefly just talking through maybe differences, or maybe just what was your process to get hired. And I realized, Gabriel, that's a little different for you, but you know, what is that kind of common process that Ryan, maybe you
I
went
can
through, and
talk
Gabriel,
briefly
what you've
about mine.
seen? Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
because
ahead.
I don't mean to be inconsiderate.
Yeah,
I
no,
have a
go ahead,
client call that
Gabriel.
starts in 2 minutes, so I will just briefly summarize mine, and then but I'm available to talk to anybody if they ever reach out on LinkedIn, always. Right. I by mistake I deployed the values, interest, career, job model, not knowing it was a model 25 years ago. So I've only had to use my resume once in 20 years. If you can see my LinkedIn profile, places I've worked for the last 20 years. So in other words, people knew who I was, and because I was go to conferences or be present, deploying what I now call the 3 Ps in hindsight: practice, presence, and participation be at events, people knew who I was. And so literally my first job out of graduate school, Morgan Stanley calls me up and says, do you want to lead our food and agriculture carbon offset program? I'm like, for a carbon offset company they ran. I'm like, sure, because I've been going to conferences. And Ryan, speaking to what you said, I'd go to the conferences and I would pour the coffee and I'd sweep the floors. And I get there, if the conference started at 9, I get there at 7, and if it ended at 6, I'd leave at 8, and make sure it worked out. I was volunteering, and so I didn't have to pay, right? I don't know what I did. I was the only one that interviewed for the job. It was in Miami, and I'm coming from Minnesota and Michigan. I'm like, we're done. And my first day in the job was in Brazil in a forest. And there you go. So be present. And if people know who you are, they'll want to hire you. It saves them a lot of time. Hiring is a very exhausting process. So over to you, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the interview part, because I saw that, I was saying we instead of I. You can always say what the lab group did, the research team did, but what you contributed to specifically in that and how it ties to the role you're applying for. I kept sticking with the we because that's what we're trained to do. I went way too much into background information. You got to tell them why they care. Like, that's enough. So think about that story and being specific. I remember a friend applying for an industry job, had like a 60-slide deck. 45 of those slides were on background information about carbon cycling. And it wasn't even a job related to carbon cycling. Like, why are we talking about this, man? It was so you have to like know why you're there and what you're doing, and just give them enough information that's kind of interesting to like hook them into it and then keep going. So there's a bit of storytelling there. And those things were it's that sort of really thinking about the message that you're trying to give and what you're trying to demonstrate for the audience is important. You got to think about that audience. They think you're smart already, but explain to them why they need to have you there. That's the part that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How you solve their problems.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. Trying to help people solve their problems. That's a great thing, a great idea to end on. I want to thank both of you for this lovely conversation. Ryan, Gabriel, you've been great. Gabriel, I realize you might have to jump if you need to. Go
Yeah,
for it.
thank you so much. So nice to see you all again.
Audience, feel free to reach out to any of us, including Aaron, who was on at the beginning, through LinkedIn. Please join the private and public sector ecologist section on LinkedIn as well. We have a group there if you want to engage with more folks like all of us, and network, reach out. And some big things that stuck out to me is the importance of communicating, translating, meeting people where they are so that they can understand you. And knowing, and Ryan, I like how you said it at one point, knowing thyself is just critical to this whole process. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know how you'll be comfortable so that your best self can come through. That is such a great bit of advice to always keep in mind. And so with that, Sandra, I don't know if there's anything you want to do to close us out. Otherwise, I'll wish everyone a great day and look forward to seeing many of you again on the next installment of this webinar series.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for the
Bye.
invitation. Bye.